Welcome to Actions and Limits. My name is Justin Atherton. I'm the Peak Performance Consultant for Confidence Unchained. With me as always is Paul Fortune. Paul is a mindset coach and the founder of A Call to Action. And together, we make Actions and Limits. Welcome to the show, the podcast where we talk about the actions we can take and the limits we create. Paul, I'm really excited about our guests coming on the show. Everyone, make sure you subscribe, whether it's on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Actions and Limits to stay updated on all our upcoming content. Paul, Daryl Davis is about to come on the show with us. I know you and I have been checking out his content a lot. What are you most excited to ask him about, man?
We're in the big leagues, baby. We're interviewing Daryl Davis. You know, he was on Joe Rogan, earlier in the year. I have a lot of stuff to talk about. One of the things I wanted to talk to him about is his emotion when well, you know what? I don't want to spoil it. Let's just bring him on.
All right,
There's
don't
a lot
spoil
of stuff.
it.
Yeah.
I think it's real important to have him on right now. You know, I did watch that interview with Joe Rogan, back in January, but that was before the pandemic, before all the BLM stuff going on. So I am interested to hear his point of view on everything that's going on right now in the world. So, let's go ahead and bring him out. So, Daryl Davis has walked on the edge with one foot dangling over the precipice. His stories of setting up surprise meetings with Klan leaders, unaware of his skin color, and attending KKK rallies has a suspense of Hitchcock, keeping audiences riveted to their seats in disbelief. He is one man successfully taking on the oldest and most racist organization in the United States by himself. He eventually became the recipient of robes and hoods from Klan members who came to rescind their beliefs after coming to know him. Davis had inadvertently stumbled upon a successful method of forming friendships between sworn enemies. His methods have made him the center of controversy. In some white circles, he has been deemed politically incorrect, and in some black circles, he has been called Uncle Tom and an Oreo. Daryl Davis often makes supporters out of his detractors by proving his methods work and issuing this challenge. I have the Klan robes and hoods hanging in my closet, given to me voluntarily by members who have quit the Klan and have come to know me. That's what I've done to improve race relations. How many robes and hoods have you received as a result of your methods? As a race relations expert, Daryl Davis has received acclaim for his book, Klan-Destine Relationships, and his work in race relations from many respected sources, including CNN, CNBC, Good Morning America, The Learning Channel, National Public Radio, The Washington Post, and many more. All right, everyone, I want you to welcome Daryl Davis to the show. Daryl, so glad to have you on the Actions Limits podcast, man.
Hey, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
So Paul and I have been checking out a lot of your content. I wasn't familiar with everything that you've been involved with until recently. I know I was watching the podcast you did with Joe Rogan, and you've been on some other TEDx and all those things. Where did all this start? Like the story from the beginning. That's like when you, and I know that's where everyone wants you to start, right? But okay. I mean, that's the powerful part of it, right?
Yeah, it is. That's what shaped me into who I am today.
Sure.
Well, we go back to when I was 3 years old, 1961. I was born in 58, so I'm 62 now. But my parents were in the U.S. Foreign Service. So we did a lot of traveling. I grew up as an American Embassy brat during the formative years of my life. And so you go overseas to a foreign country, you're there for 2 years, then you return home back here to the States. You're here for a few months, maybe a year, or just the summer, and then you get reassigned to another country for 2 years. So back and forth, back and forth. And when I was overseas back in the 60s, during kindergarten, elementary school, things like that, my classes were filled with kids from all over the world. Nigerian classmates, Japanese, French, German, Australian, Russian, whoever had an embassy in those countries, all of their children went to the same school. So that's how I grew up, in a multicultural environment. It was like a United Nations of little kids. And I didn't know any different. We all were kids. We played together. We may not have spoken the same language, but we learned how to play together, work together, have slumber parties. There was no difference, and we were kids.
Yeah.
I didn't know there was a difference until I would come home, back here to my own country. Now, so when I would come home, I would be in either an all-black school or a black and white school, depending upon whether the schools at that point in time had been integrated or were they still segregated. Because, Brown versus the Board of Education desegregated schools in 1954, 4 years before I was born. But, it didn't happen overnight. It happened over like a decade or more. So, they were still segregated at that point. And I would either be in all black schools or black and white schools. And one of the times when I came home at age 10 in fourth grade, 1968, I was one of two black kids in the entire school, myself in fourth grade and a little girl in second grade. So consequently, all of my friends, being fourth and fifth graders, were all white. And some of my guy friends were members of the Cub Scouts and invited me to join. So I joined, had a lot of fun, great troop, great den mother and all that. And we had a parade in which my den mother let me carry the American flag. I'm marching with my fellow Scouts. There's also other organizations, the Girl Scouts, Brownies, Boy Scouts, 4-H Club, and whoever else. And nothing but a sea of white people. And I'm the only black person there. But I didn't even realize that, I'm just out marching with my fellow Scouts. And people were cheering us and waving flags, everything's cool. Got to one point on this parade route when I was suddenly getting hit from my right side by soda pop cans and soda pop bottles and whatever else people could pick up, small things off the street. And me being naive and having never gone through this before, the first thing I thought was, these people over here, they don't like the Scouts. That's how naive I was. And it wasn't until my Scout leaders all came running over, who all were white people. And they're like huddled over me and quickly escorted me out of the danger. And I kept saying, why are they doing that to me? Because nobody else was getting this protection. I couldn't figure that out because I thought, they didn't like the Scouts. And they just kept shushing me and rushing me along and never answered my question. So that day when I got home, my folks who were not at the parade were asking me, how did you fall down and get all scraped up? And they're fixing me up, cleaning me up. And I told them, I didn't fall down. I told them what had happened. And they sat me down, my mom and dad sat me down and explained to me what racism was. And believe it or not, at the age of 10, I had no idea what they were talking about. I'd never even heard the word racism. So they had to define it for me. And their definition made absolutely no sense whatsoever. Not that they were incapable of defining it. Certainly, they've been through more of it than I had at their age. But it made no sense because my 10-year-old brain could not process the idea that somebody who had never seen me or had never spoken to me, wanted to hurt me for no other reason than the color of my skin, sure. Especially given the fact that the people doing it did not look any different to me than my friends right there at that school, or my friends from the American Embassy overseas, or my little French friends, my German friends, my Swedish friends. They look the same. And so it couldn't be the color of my skin. That's ridiculous. So I didn't believe my folks. And I didn't know why they were lying to me, but for whatever reason they were. Yeah, that's what I truly believed.
Yeah.
And within 2 months, a month and a half, 2 months later, that same year, 1968, on April the 4th, Martin Luther King was assassinated. And I remember it very well. Every major city in this country burned to the ground, just like we've seen over the past few months. And I then accepted that this thing called racism, actually exists. But I didn't know why it existed. Okay, so my parents hadn't lied. But why do people hate one another because of the color of their skin? So I formed a question in my mind at that time, at that age, which was, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? And from that point forward, for the next 52 years, I've been on a quest to find out the answer to that question.
It's a pretty great question, Daryl. I'm sure you've come across a lot of interesting answers to that.
Indeed I have. Indeed I have. Yeah, so, that's what led me to the Klan. As a teenager and on through adulthood, I began buying every book I could find. There are no courses. I mean, or there weren't back then. I'm sure there probably aren't now. Not at least not when I was in college. Like Race 101 or something. I had to learn all this on my own. I bought every book I could find on Black supremacy, on white supremacy, on anti-Semitism, on the Klan, on the Nazis in Germany, on the neo-Nazis over here. Just trying to learn, where does that ideology come from? Where is it going? How can it be addressed? What causes it? The books all talked about it, but never answered my question, at least not to my application. So I had an opportunity one time, just by serendipity. I graduated with my degree in music and became a full-time musician. Well, country music had made a comeback, and all the bars and clubs that were playing top 40 and disco and whatever, switched over to country. There had been a movie called Urban Cowboy with
John Travolta.
John Travolta, and starring John Travolta and the Mechanical Bull, right?
Yeah.
And so, all the bars had those bulls installed and all that, and line dancing. So I joined a country band, and I was the only Black member of the band, and they were well established in this area. So they played this bar called the Silver Dollar Lounge one night, and the Silver Dollar Lounge was known to be like an all-white bar. Not written, all-white bar, nothing like that. But Black people knew they were not welcome there, so they did not go there. And when you go somewhere where you're not welcome, number one, and number two, alcohol is being served, it's not a good combination.
Poor combination. Yeah.
Very poor. So here I was in the Silver Dollar Lounge, and I came off the bandstand after the first set and walking over to the band table, and some guy came up from behind, put his arm around my shoulder, and he praised my piano playing and said, "This is the first time you ever heard a Black man play piano like Jerry Lee Lewis." And I was rather surprised that this guy, being older than me, didn't know the Black origin of Jerry Lee Lewis's style. And I proceeded to explain to him, hey, I got it from the same place Jerry Lee did, from Black blues and boogie woogie piano playing, players. That's where that rockabilly rock and roll style came from. Yeah. Oh, no, Jerry Lee invented that. I never heard no Black man play like that. And so even after I told him, I know the guy, he's told me himself where he learned how to play. The guy didn't buy that either. But he was very insistent, that I come back to his table and have a drink with them. He's going to buy me a drink. So I went back to his table. I asked for cranberry juice, and he paid for it. Then he takes his glass, he clinks my glass and cheers me and says, this is the first time I ever sat down with a Black man and had a drink. And now I'm totally mystified, because given my background, I sat down with all kinds of people, white or anybody else, thousands of them, and had a meal, a beverage, a conversation. And this guy was older than me and had never done that. So, I'm trying to think, where's this guy been? There are Black people around this town. How did he miss them all? And so I asked him, I said, why? And at first he didn't answer. And I asked him again. He had a friend sitting next to him who elbowed him and said, tell him. I said, tell me. And he finally looked at me and said, I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan. I just burst out laughing, because understand, I read all these books that I told you I bought, and none of my books talked about Klansmen coming up and embracing some Black guy. I want to hang out and buy him a drink. That's not in any book. So I think, the guy's, jerking me around. So I'm laughing, going along with the joke. He goes inside his pocket, pulls out his wallet, and he hands me his Klan membership card. I look at this thing. First thing I see is that red circle with the white cross and the red blood drop in the center. The Klan, it's called a Mayoke. It's a Klan emblem. And I recognized, I stopped laughing. This thing is for real. So I gave it back to him. And now I'm wondering in my own mind, why am I sitting at this table with this guy? What's going on here? But he was very, very friendly. He gave me his phone number, wanted me to call him whenever this band was to come back to this bar, and let him know, give him a heads up, because he wanted to bring his friends, meaning Klansmen and Klanswomen, to see, the Black guy play like Jerry Lee. So I'd call him every 6 weeks on a Wednesday or Thursday and say, hey man, we're going to be down at the Silver Dollar. Come on out this weekend. He'd come both nights, Friday and Saturday, and he would bring his friends. And some of them were curious about me. Well, they all were curious. So they'd gather around and watch me play near the stage or get out on the dance floor. But then when we take a break, I'd make my way over to his table, say hello. And some were curious enough to stay there and want to talk to me and meet me. Others would see me coming and they'd get up and scurry across to some other part of the club. So, they could watch me, but they didn't want to touch me or, get anywhere too near me, which was cool. So I did that for a while. At the end of that year, I quit that band. I went back to playing rock and roll and whatever else. And so I lost track of the guy because I really had no reason to stay in touch with the Klan. And a good while later, it dawned on me just out of the blue, like, Daryl, the answer to the question that's been plaguing you since you were 10 years old fell right into your lap. And you didn't even realize it. Who better to ask that question of than someone who would go so far as to join an organization that for over 100 years has been practicing hating people who don't look like them and who don't believe as they believe. Surely a Klansman would know the answer to that question. How can you hate me when you don't even know me? Get back in contact with that guy. And what you should do is you should get him to set you up with the Klan leader for this state, and then go up north, go down south, go to the Midwest, go to the West, interview other ones, and write a book. Because no book had been written by a Black author at that point. And still, from the perspective of sitting down, interviewing KKK leaders and members, there have been a couple books written by Black authors who had escaped a lynching, but not from sitting down talking with their prospective lynchers. So I said, hey, that's to myself, that's a good idea. Let me track that guy down. So that's how it all started, as far as wanting to meet these people and sit down. Now, I can tell you this: I had no intention of becoming friends with them. I had no intention of converting anybody. That was not my mission. My mission was simply to get an answer to my question. That was all. I want to understand that mindset and write about it. Because, both you and Paul and myself, when we were kids, we heard the things like, a tiger doesn't change its stripes, a leopard doesn't change its spots. We all have heard that before. So why would I assume that a Klansman would change his robe and hood? I just thought, that is what they are, and all I want to know is why. That's all.
Sure.
So I had my my secretary. Well, the guy who gave me the Klan leader, his name was Roger Kelly. The guy who gave me Mr. Kelly's phone number and personal information was the guy that I met in the bar, and he begged me, not to give Mr. Kelly the source of the information because he was fearful. I asked him to introduce me to Mr. Kelly. He said, "Oh, no, we can't do that. We both get in trouble." And so he gave it to me on the condition that I not reveal to Mr. Kelly where I got it. I said, fine. But he warned me. He said, "Daryl, do not fool with him. He will kill you." And I said, well, that's the whole reason why I need to know, why I need to see him. That's the whole premise of how can somebody hate me, that much when they don't know me. So I had my secretary who was white. And the only reason I mentioned her race is because I figured if I called Mr. Kelly, he might detect in my voice that I'm Black and say, I'm not talking to you, click. And my whole project would have ended before it got started. But I'm thinking ahead, so I figure, okay, well, if she calls him, he will know by her voice that she's white. And I know enough about the mentality that he would not automatically assume that this white woman was working for a Black man, especially a Black man who's writing a book on the Klan, because, they didn't exist. And so I had her call, but I told her specifically, do not tell him that I'm Black unless he asks, but don't give him reason to ask. But if he does ask, don't lie to him, tell him the truth.
Sure.
So she called and he didn't ask, and he agreed to do the interview. We arranged to meet on a Sunday afternoon, I remember this, at 5:15 p.m. At the motel right above the Silver Dollar Lounge.
Daryl, I just wanted to interrupt just 1 second.
Sure.
I wanted to ask you this question when I've heard this story about you bringing in Mr. Kelly. Talk about that emotion before he came to the hotel door at 5:15. I would have been sweating. I would have been so scared, you're about to, at the time he was a Grand Dragon. He was going to come see you for the first time and see that you were a black man. I mean, talk about that emotion real quick for me.
Okay, there really wasn't any at that point. And what I attribute that to, I think, would be my background, having been around so many different people all over the world. At that point, I mean, today, we're talking 1990 when I interviewed Mr. Kelly. Today, when you combine my travels as a child with my travels as an adult on my own professional musician performing around the world or whatever, I've been in 57 different countries on 6 continents. Back then, by 1990, I'd probably been in maybe 30-some,
Sure.
And so I'd already been exposed to a lot of different cultures, and truly, I just felt the Klan was another culture. And a lot of people don't understand that with me. But I will say this, perhaps had I not had all that travel and exposure as a kid or as an adult even, maybe I would have been apprehensive. I probably would not even have started this whole project. I probably would have stayed as far. I probably would have stayed as far away from those people as I could. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But because I've been around so many different kinds of people, I just took the Klan as just another culture, really. Now, I mean, don't get me wrong. I wasn't so stupid as to think, that they're not dangerous, sure. But I just figured, hey, I'm going to meet this guy and see what his issue is. And but in the back of my head, I know their history. I have all the books on them and all that kind of stuff. So, the room was such that you could not see who was in the room from the hallway. You had to come in and turn a corner, and then there's the room. And so I sat in the most obscure corner of the room, took the lamp off the lamp table and set it on, in the corner, and put a chair on one side for him, a chair on the other side for me. So I'm sitting there when there was a knock on the door, and Mary, my secretary, gets up and goes around the corner, opens the door, and in walks this Grand Nighthawk, Grand meaning state level, Grand Dragon, top man of the state. So Nighthawk means bodyguard security. And so he comes in wearing military camouflage and that same red circle, white cross, blood drop patch right here. The initials KKK over here. And Knights of the Ku Klux Klan were embroidered on his little beret cap on his head. And he had a semi-automatic handgun on his hip. He came in, and Mr. Kelly was right behind him in this dark blue suit and tie. And when the bodyguard turned the corner and saw me, he just stopped instantly in his tracks. And Mr. Kelly did not realize that this guy in front of him had stopped walking, and he slammed into his back and knocked him forward. So now they both are stumbling around, trying to regain their balance. And I'm just sitting here at my table, watching this. And I can see in their faces, written all over their faces like a billboard sign, they're thinking, did the guy downstairs, the desk clerk, give us the wrong room number, or is this an ambush or what? So I saw that. I saw the apprehension, and I stood up and I went like this to show that I had nothing in my hands. And I walked forward. I put my right hand out, and I said, "Hi, Mr. Kelly." I said, "I'm Daryl Davis." And he shook my hand, and the Nighthawk shook my hand. So everything was cool. Come on in, please have a seat. He sat down, and the Nighthawk stood at attention to his right. And then he asked me to show him my ID, which I did. I made a little comment about that, and then I took my seat. And I had a black canvas bag sitting next to my chair, in which I had a cassette recorder, which I'd already placed in the center of the table. And I asked him, was it okay to record our interview? He said, fine. Also in the bag, I had a copy of the Bible and some blank cassettes. And I had the Bible because the Klan claims to be a Christian organization. And they claim that the Bible preaches racial separation. Now, in my reading of the Bible, I'd never seen that in there. So, or at least I didn't interpret it that way. And I brought it in the event, so I'm going to question him about that. I want to be able to pull out my Bible and say, here, Mr. Kelly,
Sure.
Please show me chapter and verse where it says blacks and whites must be separate. I'm all prepared. So every time I'd reach into this bag, I'd reach down, the bodyguard would reach up. And I understood that because he's doing his job. His job is to protect his boss. He has no idea what's in my bag. So I understood that. And I didn't worry about it too much. And after, I don't know, 45 minutes or so, he stopped moving. I went in and out of the bag, no problem. He realized there's no threat in there. Now, I want to back up a little bit. Within the first 5 or 10 minutes of this interview, I asked my question about, how can you hate somebody you don't know them, and as well as other questions. And what he told me was this, that Black people are prone to crime, that we're criminals. Now, he evidenced that by the fact that there are more Black people in prison than there are white people. So I'm sitting here listening to him, and I realize that what he's saying is true, but it's a half-truth. Because yes, there are more Blacks in prison than white people, but he's not taking into account the imbalance.
Did he freeze?
They cannot afford adequately.
Daryl, 1 second, you froze right there. So he couldn't take into account the imbalance?
Yeah. What he said was true, that there are more Blacks in prison than whites, but it's a half-truth because he's not taking into consideration the imbalance in our judicial system that penalizes Blacks heavier than it penalizes whites, and has been doing so for a very long time. And also the fact that there are plenty of poor white people and poor Black people in prison, whether they did the crime or not, but they're there because they could not afford adequate legal representation, and they take a plea to something they didn't even do, and there they are, right? So, but what he sees shapes his perspective, and one's perspective is one's reality. So he sees more Blacks there, therefore they must be more prone to crime than white people. All right. Then he goes on to say that Black people are inherently lazy, that we prefer to scam the government welfare system than go out and work and get a job and earn a honest living. He says that Black people, that there had been a book that came out right around that time called The Bell Curve by this guy, Dr. Charles Murray, which is a crock of BS. Anyway, he's, at the time, they were like toting, they never read the book, but they just toted it around, like if this is the Bible.
They read the back cover, maybe.
Exactly.
Right?
There you go. Right. And so he says, Black people are born with a smaller brain than white people. So the larger the brain, the more capacity for IQ, for intelligence, right? And so this was evidenced by the fact that Black students consistently score lower on SATs than white kids. And again, this is true, but it is a half-truth. And if you think about it, the schools in the inner city are not as upgrade as the schools in the suburbs.
Sure.
And where do most Black kids go to school? In the inner city.
Yeah.
Okay, so therefore they're not getting the great textbooks, the great teachers, the great computers, facilities, whatever you have. All right, and I'll say this: Black kids who go to school in the suburbs score just as well or higher than some of the white people, and white kids who go to school in the inner city also score very low.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the brain, it has to do with the quality of education.
Exactly.
Right? Okay, so he's not considering that. He just sees the net result. And he's right about that, but it's a half truth again. So I'm just sitting there listening to this. And is this what is what he's saying offensive? Yeah, of course it's offensive. But am I offended by it? No, absolutely not. And the reason being is because what he is saying is simply untrue. It certainly doesn't apply to me.
Sure.
So I'm listening to him, and what had happened was, I didn't realize it at the time, but I realized it later, because I would hear the same thing from other Klan people. When they first come in the room, as he did, not realizing that I'm Black, his wall shot up automatically, because he's expecting a white guy to be there interviewing him. What's this Black guy doing here, right? I'm the enemy. So that wall comes up. And sure, he's talked to Black people before, but not, in a congenial kind of fashion. We're his enemy. So he's on the attack, and he's used to getting pushback. So, you tell somebody, that they're unintelligent and that they're lazy and that they're a criminal. I mean, within 45 seconds, they're giving you pushback,
Sure.
either verbally or physically. So, and here I am, I'm just sitting back, letting this guy speak his piece. He's never had that happen before. So he's thrown off his game. So the wall begins coming down the more he's talking, and I'm not resisting.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, because if I try to push back while the wall is up, I can't penetrate the wall. He's not hearing me. It's like this.
Well, you're showing that empathy and that active listening, and
Exactly.
he's just letting his guard down. He's giving you more information.
Exactly. So now the wall is down. He's gone through whatever it is he had to spew out, and I'm listening. And so now he feels compelled to reciprocate because I gave him the opportunity to say whatever it was he wanted to say. And one thing that I've noticed through all my travels, no matter how far I've gone away from this country, I've gone to the other side of the earth, okay? And all over, no matter how far I've gone, how different somebody may be that I've met or their culture or whatever, at the end of the day, I realize we all are human beings. And as human beings, we all want basically the same 4 or 5 things. We want to be loved. We want to be respected. We want to be treated fairly. We want to be heard. And we want the same things for our family as anybody else wants for their family. And as long as we can keep those things in mind, no matter where we go, if we keep those things in mind, we can get along in any society. We can navigate it, okay? Because we all are the same at that point. They have different cultures, different colors, different languages, but those same basic foundation type things, if we respect those, we can get along. So I was just respecting them because that's just how I was brought up. And my parents being diplomats, my dad's job was to foster better relations between the foreign country that we were in and the United States.
You had some of those negotiation skills already.
Well, I got them vicariously just by watching my dad as a little kid.
Yeah.
So anyway, here I am. I'm giving him respect by letting him say what he wants to say. I'm not respecting what he's saying, but I'm respecting his right to say it. Okay. And I'm giving him the opportunity to be heard. Everybody wants to be heard. I'm letting him be heard. No skin off my back. So now his wall is down, and so now he can hear what I'm saying. So he feels compelled to reciprocate and let me say my piece. And I tell him, I said, look, I hear what you're saying, but I don't have a criminal record. Nobody in my family has a criminal record. I've never been on welfare. My parents never been on welfare. And as far as SAT goes, and my brain, I never measured it, but I'm sure it's the same size as anybody else's, And as far as the SATs go, my SATs, got me into college. I have a bachelor's degree. Both my parents had master's degrees, and my dad was working on his PhD. So now I'm saying all this knowing that this guy barely made it out of high school, if he did. Okay. I knew that I had more education in my little finger than he and his whole clan put together. But I'm not gonna say, throw that in his face, because that would be an attack and that would cause the wall to go up. So rather than go on the offense, I go on the defense and just explain where I'm coming from. And that way he hears it because the wall is down. And I can tell you this, because I've been doing this for 36 years and it's happened time and time and time again. What happens is this. They go home, and at the end of the day, as we all do, we reflect upon what transpired during the day. And he's thinking, damn, I had a conversation today with a black guy for 3 hours, and we didn't, fight. And what he said about such and such, it makes sense, but he's black. But what he said was true, but he's black. So there's a cognitive dissonance going on. He knows what I said was true, either because he knows it or he researched it and found it to be true. But he can't get over the source, being black, telling the truth, because it conflicts with what he's supposed to stand for.
Sure.
He's supposed to stand for everything that I'm against, and against everything that I'm for. So now we both are on the same page and he can't handle it. So it's a cognitive dissonance. So that becomes a dilemma for him. And he has to decide. It doesn't happen overnight, it happens over time. he has to decide, do I disregard this guy's color and believe the truth because I know it to be true and change my direction? Or do I consider that he's Black and continue living a lie and knowing that it's a lie? So depending upon, how much they have invested in this organization may determine how soon or how much later they get out, if they get out.
Yeah.
Right.
Daryl, can you talk about that sound that you heard when you were talking to Mr. Gelb?
Yeah, absolutely. So that happened in the beginning of the interview, that exchange. But that point, the wall had come down. So he felt more comfortable, saying what he had to say. And I listened and we exchanged that way. So we're going along pretty smoothly. And like I said, the bodyguard had stopped, reaching for his gun when I reached down into my bag. And a little over an hour into the interview, just out of nowhere, there was a very quick, short sound, like a that was about it. And he and I were just talking, and that sound happened, and we all jumped. Because, it was incongruent with what we were doing. And naturally, I blamed him for doing it, because I knew I didn't do it. So if I didn't do it, he had to have done it, process of elimination. And so I jumped up out of my chair and I hit the table because I feared for my life. The sound was so short that my ear could not discern what it was. I kept trying to hear it again and it wasn't there. And so because it happened out of nowhere, I automatically perceived it to be ominous. We fear what we can't explain. Ignorance breeds fear, all right? I didn't know what the sound was. So I think it's a threat. I think it's an ominous sound, and so I fear I'm getting ready to go into survival mode. And I came up out of my chair. I hit the table. I'm looking right at him, right into his eyes, and I didn't say a word, but my eyes were speaking, and they were saying to him, "What did you just do?" And he was like looking right into my eyes, and I could read his eyes as well as I could read his face when he first walked in that door. His eyes were saying to me, "What did you just do?" And the bodyguard had his hand on the butt of his gun. He never pulled it; just had his hand on it. And he was like looking back and forth between both of us, like, what did either one of you all just do? and Mary was over here on my left side, sitting on top of the dresser because there were no more chairs. And she realized what had happened. We had gotten some soda pop and from the machine down the hall and put it in the ice bucket, filled it with ice. So I wanted to offer some cold beverage, and he froze.
I'm good. He might have froze, but
yeah,
we're good.
Okay, so the ice bucket and soda pop were sitting over there next to her, and she realized what had happened. The ice had begun melting, and the cans were shifting down the ice. And it happened again, and we all began laughing at how ignorant we all had been. Now, I said it before, I'll say it again. This was not a learning moment, but this was a teaching moment. The learning would come later. You get to process that. But in retrospect, you think about it, somebody could have gotten shot over an ice cube. That's how ridiculous it was, but also how serious it was. Sure. And because of the situation, I'm Black. I'm sitting in this room with the head of the Klan. I've already been told by a former Klansman that this guy would kill me, not to fool with him. So I got all that going through my head. And this dude is making some weird noise that I can't explain. So I think, I'm under attack now. I gotta, and he's the one who did it. So, fear causes you to accuse other people.
Sure.
It's and that's just the way fear does. And because you can't explain it, so if you can't explain it, it's because somebody else did it. That's why. And regardless of where it came from. So the lesson that was taught was that ignorance breeds fear. We all were ignorant of the bucket of ice and cans of soda, and we'd forgotten about it. And here it enters into our little comfort zone that we had created between us, our relationship. Out of nowhere, it just came busting in with this little short noise, and it just upset the apple cart, and we all freaked out on each other, right? And so, the bodyguard's ready to attack. I'm ready to attack, and then we all are laughing, and in that laugh, we had humanized one another. because we all were fearful. We all were feeling the exact same thing. I wasn't feeling because I was black. He wasn't feeling because he was white. He's feeling because he's a human being.
Sure.
Same thing with me. So in a sense, we all coalesced around humanity in that one moment, right? So then we just carried on with the interview. Everything was cool. But the lesson taught is this: ignorance breeds fear. We fear the things that we don't understand. And if we don't keep the fear in check, of course, along with fear comes accusation. If we don't keep that in check, that will escalate and breed hatred. We hate the things that frighten us. And along with the hatred comes anger. We get angry when we hate. And if we don't keep that in check, it escalates into destruction. So we stop short of that last component. Had I pounced across the table and hurt one of them, or had the guy drawn the gun and shot one of us,
Sure.
it stopped there. But as I've pointed out in other interviews, this whole country saw exactly what I'm talking about manifest itself to completion 3 years ago, last month, August 12th, 2017, in Charlottesville, Virginia, where they had their large white supremacist rally. And on that day, August 12th, 2017, there was a lot of ignorance in Charlottesville. There was a lot of fear in Charlottesville. It escalated into a lot of hatred in Charlottesville. And what did it culminate in? It culminated in destruction when a white supremacist got inside his vehicle and tried to murder as many counter-protesters as he could by driving full force into the crowd. He succeeded in injuring 20 people and murdering one young lady named Heather Heyer. That's the process. That's what happens. So if we want to address this problem of racism, I think we've been going about it all wrong. We're using a departmental or corporate type of addressing of it. Corporately, or departmentally, say like a police department, people take their cues from the top. All right. If the top is loose, the subordinates down on the street or down on the floor are going to be loose.
Sure.
They tighten up there, they're going to be tight down here. All right. So top level is destruction. We can't use that model for racism. Forget about the destruction at the top. That's just a symptom. The next level down is the hatred. Forget about that. That's another symptom. Next level down, the fear. Forget about the fear. The root cause of all this is the ignorance. We start worrying about the destruction and the hate and the fear and all that stuff. Forget about that stuff. All right, those are just symptoms. Address the cause. The cause is ignorance. If we cure the ignorance, then we got nothing to fear, because we fear that of which we are ignorant, right? So if you cure the ignorance, nothing to fear. With nothing to fear, there's nothing to hate.
So how do we do that today, Daryl? Like, how do we do that with what's going on in the world?
Because we have to stop letting our emotions get in the way of our progress and start worrying about all these symptoms, right? Okay. With nothing to fear, there's nothing to hate. You only hate what frightens you, all right? With nothing to hate, there's something to get angry about and destroy, okay? The good thing is this: there's a cure for ignorance. That cure is called education and exposure. Seriously.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Because, you have people who are ignorant, and you have people who are stupid. And some people, want to define those terms, ignorance and stupidity, as being synonymous. No, for me, they're different. An ignorant person is someone who makes a bad choice or a wrong decision because he or she does not have the facts, does not have the proper information to make the right decision. You give that person the information, they can make the right decision, you have alleviated their ignorance, and on you go. A stupid person is someone who has the facts, who has the right information, and they still make the wrong decision. Okay? so
what's the cure for the stupid people out there?
There is no cure for stupid people.
Okay, got it.
There's no cure.
No,
if trust me, if you had a cure for stupidity, you'd be the world's wealthiest man. Take us all on a cruise somewhere. So, but fortunately, there are more ignorant people than there are stupid.
Okay.
And so let's focus on the ignorance. We can cure it through education and exposure. There's no cure for stupidity, and until that person decides to employ the education that he or she has.
Sure.
Right. So we have to not let our emotions get in the way, and that is what happened with many of these people. Not all of them, but many of them. My not letting my emotions get in the way when I'm told that I'm a criminal, that I'm stupid, that that I'm lazy. I listen to it. It rolls off my back because I know who I am. Now, if my parents told me, Daryl, I think you're lazy, I think you're prone to crime, and you're not a very smart person, you're very unintelligent, I might take that into consideration, given the fact that they brought me into this world and they raised me. But some dude who just walks in my hotel room 10 minutes ago telling me this, no, not a chance.
So how do we educate people, Daryl? Like, how do we put the information out there that will stop this from happening? And I like what you said. You can't do it from the top down, because you're not going to legislate away racism. You're not going to stop it by doing that. I like that you're getting to the root cause of it. But how do we implement that?
Well, you're doing it right now, man, because these conversations, were not something that people wanted to have years ago. They tried to avoid it. Keep it under the carpet. Don't talk about stuff like that. Keep it in the closet. And now we're having to talk about it because it's in our face. It's like a pressure cooker. You can only put so much pressure on there before the lid blows. That's why you have that little release valve, right? And so the lid has blown. So now, I mean, it's not funny, but it's true. So we have to address it before it gets worse. But I'm going to tell you why we need to address it right now. We cannot wait. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist or anything like that. I mean, yes, conspiracies do exist, and some of them are very, very real, while others are just fantasies or something. But this is not a conspiracy. This is what's happening. Let me go back a little ways. Okay, when we all were kids, I'm older than both of you. I'm 62. When I was a kid, even the Black population. Well, first of all, this country was built on a two-tier society: white supremacy and slavery. And as we progressed over the decades, we progressed like this, maybe even like this, but we've never progressed like this on an even or equal footing, right? Okay, when I was a kid, Black people were 12% of this country. Native Americans, 1%. Hispanic people, Latino people, around 2%. Asians were around 4%. Today, Black people still remain at 12.9, almost 13%. All right. Native Americans remain at 1%. Asians are at 6%. The census is taken every 10 years. Just Google U.S. Census Bureau. Go back to 1960 or whatever, and look every 10 years. You're going to see Black people 12 every 10 years. We haven't grown. All right. But Hispanic people today are almost 18%, 17 point something percent.
Yeah.
So this is happening, all right? And if you take just 12% Black and 17% Latino or Hispanic, that's 29% non-white. So when I was a kid, when whites were like 86%, 84%, now it's coming down. And it's well predicted. Just watch the census. 22 years from now, 2042, this country will be like this. Not in terms of equality, but in terms of minority majority.
Sure.
It'll be 50% white, 50% non-white. Not 50% Black, but people of color, Black, Latino, Asian, whatever else, non-white. Okay, like that. For the first time in the history of this country. And between 2045 and 2050, it's going to flip. And for the first time, whites will be a minority in this country. And while there are plenty of white people who say, hey, that's cool, that's evolution, that's what happens, I welcome it, I don't have a problem with that, there is a percentage that are becoming unhinged. They cannot handle that. When you have sat on the throne of power for 400 years, and you're seeing your throne legs getting chopped down, and now you're being lowered down to the level of the inferior people, when you were superior all that time, it's very hard to get off the throne of power. People don't want to give up their power. And so that's why you're seeing all these groups pop up, Klan, neo-Nazis, alt-right, this one, that one, saying, come join us, we're going to take our country back. We're going to make America great again. and we're going to build that wall and send everybody, back to where they came from and whatever else. This is America, our homeland. They're taking away our culture, taking down our monuments, blah, blah, blah. All right. That's because they're losing power and they can't handle that. So they're going and they're joining these groups that are promising to take our country back and make America great again. All right. But when those groups don't do anything, some of those people who just joined up, they get frustrated. And they say, you know what? If the Klan can't do it or the National Socialist Movement can't do it, I'm going to do it myself. And they go off on their own and walk into a black church in Charleston, South Carolina, boom, boom, boom. Or into the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, boom, boom, boom. Or the Walmart in El Paso, boom, boom, boom. All right? These people are lone wolves. And we have intelligence operatives from our different intelligence agencies, FBI, et cetera, who fit the description of somebody who would join one of these groups. And they can go join undercover and they gather intelligence and foil a lot of these plots. But you cannot infiltrate a lone wolf. It's only one person. How do you get into one person?
Sure.
Right? So as we get closer and closer to 2042, unfortunately, we're going to see more and more of these lone wolves. They're becoming unhinged. You saw one the other night. The dude, a 17-year-old guy who came from Illinois into Wisconsin with his gun, right? Okay. And shot 3 people. He killed 2 of them and wounded the 3rd, and then he went home. Mm-hmm. That's a Kyle Rittenhouse, I think was his name, right?
Yeah.
That is a lone wolf, all right? And we're going to see more and more of those people as we get closer because the landscape is changing. What used to be all white, now it looks to them like, all brown. And what the neo-Nazis and KKK people and alt-right people tell me is, Daryl, I don't want my grandkids to be brown. They call it the browning of America or white genocide through miscegenation, through race mixing. And they don't want to see that. So that's why they're becoming disconcerted. And every time one of these lone wolves gets busted and the intelligence agencies or law enforcement goes and raids their homes, what do they find? A big cache of automatic weapons. And that's for the race war, otherwise known as RAHOWA, RAHOWA, which stands for Racial Holy War. They also call it the Boogaloo. Those are white supremacist terms, RAHOWA and Boogaloo.
I've never heard that before.
Me either.
Look them up. Look them up. Okay, Google them.
I believe you, Daryl. Just never.
Well, I had an encounter with the head of the American Nazi Party a long time ago when I was 15. A guy named George Lincoln Rockwell was the founder of the American Nazi Party. He was a big proponent of the ideology of Adolf Hitler. And George Lincoln Rockwell was murdered. Well, the American Nazi Party was founded about 35 minutes from where I'm sitting right now, right over in Arlington, Virginia. And he was always at battle with Martin Luther King and everybody. And he had all his little Nazis and stuff, American Nazis. And he was murdered by one of his own people in a dispute outside of a laundromat one day. Guy pulled out a gun and shot him and killed him on the sidewalk. Anyway, George Lincoln Rockwell's right-hand guy was a guy named Matt Cole. And so Matt Cole inherited the organization. He became the commander. And his right-hand guy was a guy named Martin Kerr. In 1974, when I was 15 in 10th grade, they came to my high school over in Rockville, Maryland. And we had a class called the POTC, which stood for Problems of the 20th Century. And we had a great teacher. He'd always bring in controversial speakers. And it was a class for seniors, but I was taking it as a sophomore. And this day, the head of the American Nazi Party came to our class. Now, you could never do that today,
No way.
Right. But we're talking 1970s, right? So the term political correctness didn't even exist back then, And I'll be honest with you, I'm glad that guy came to my school because, that it opened up my eyes to what was going on. I mean, he didn't recruit me or anything like that, obviously, but I learned more about that ideology. And he stood up there in the front of our classroom. He just died a few years ago, Matt Cole. Martin Kerr was still around. He was at the Charlottesville thing. Anyway, Matt Cole pointed at me and pointed at another black guy in the class and said, "We're going to ship you back to Africa." And then he went like this, "And all you Jews out there, you're going back to Israel." Now, I just sat there looking at the guy. You know, like, what on earth is this man talking about? And one of my classmates said, what happens if they don't go? And Matt Cole said, they have no choice. If they do not leave voluntarily, they will be exterminated in the upcoming race war. That was the first time I ever heard the term race war. I'm thinking to myself, you know, what is this man talking about? You know, the Civil War was over in 1865. What's this race war? I'd never heard that term before. And then he said that that when the race, because he said that the race war is inevitable. He said, when it happens, your uniform will be the color of your skin. I've never forgotten that. Your uniform will be the color of your skin. And so his uniform obviously was white. So every enemy was every non-white. And I did not confront him. I just sat there listening to him. And later that day, I was standing beside my locker, and they were leaving the school because they stuck around for a couple other POTC classes. And they had to walk by me. And they paused right in front of me. They didn't say anything to me, but they paused right in front of me and like sneered at me. And then they started laughing and went on down the hall out the door. And that's when I started buying all these books, you know, on Nazis and neo-Nazis and Klan, all that kind of stuff, because I just had to learn this ideology. And 8 years later, I went to an American Nazi rally demonstration, and I went right up to Matt Cole, and I said, Matt Cole. He like jumped back, like, you know, who is this black man, you know, talking to me? And he says, do I know you? And I said, well, you spoke at my high school. He says, what high school would that be? I said, Thomas Wooten High School. He looked at me again. He goes, oh, yes, 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 I remember you. And I said, yes, do you remember what you told me? He says, he nodded, he said, oh, yes. I said, well, I'm still here. And he says, well, I can see that. What can I do for you? I said, well, you can tell me just who the hell gives you the authority to make permanent travel arrangements for me, right? This was right in Lafayette Park, right across the street from the White House. And this was a silent, unpublicized rally. So nobody really even knew about it except for whoever they told. So they arrived, you know, there was nothing Nazi about them. No Gestapo uniforms, no swastikas, no SS insignias, just dark black suits. And they just stood there silently facing the White House. The White House knew who they were, but nobody else did. Otherwise, there'd be all kinds of law enforcement. So, you know, that's why he was nervous when I came up to him. But I'd found out about this rally. So that was earlier in the year. And then in that summer, they had a publicized rally in Washington, D.C. Now, here's what they do. They had this publicized rally. They've been publicizing it for 3 months, that they're going to have the American Nazi Party recruitment rally, national recruitment rally in Washington, D.C., which was ridiculous, but that's what they wanted to do. And then I later understood why they did that. People began protesting long in advance of this rally, telling D.C. not to. So the protesters could not get to them. And you had about 10,000 or more protesters. These people came with baseball bats, bricks and chains, all kinds of stuff. And so now the Nazis had protection. I go down there to watch this. Couldn't get anywhere near them, but you could see them. They come off this bus. There's Matt Cole and Martin Kerr. This time they're wearing Gestapo uniforms, SS insignias, and flying swastika flags and doing Sieg Heil, Hi Hitler, because they had police protection. See, they're cowards. When they don't have protection, you know, they're all cool and quiet. But then when they got protection, they act out. So they're taunting the crowd. And the crowd is like rushing the police, and the police are pushing them back. And then they take their bricks and projectiles and throw them over the heads of the police to land on one of the Nazis in the circle. So that's when the cops pull up the tear gas and begin spraying everybody and beating them with sticks. And my secretary and I just standing there watching this, and we got struck, just standing there, because it became like mass hysteria. I said, let's get out of here. So we go home. We're watching the 6 o'clock news. And back then there was no cable, just NBC, CBS, and ABC. So we're watching our local NBC affiliate here in the DC area. And they're showing the whole thing, you know, of the Nazi party there having thing. The rioters are like breaking out police windows in the cars, turning the cars over, setting them on fire, all kinds of stuff. And these are white people, Jewish people, black people, all kinds of people against the Nazis. And so Matt Cole is in the studio with the anchor saying, and she's running the footage saying, you see, it's the blacks and the Jews who are denying us our right to freedom of speech, our right to freedom of assembly. It's the blacks and the Jews who are destroying this country. This country is being run by ZOG, Z-O-G. ZOG is a white supremacist acronym for Zionist Occupied Government. And that's what they call it. And then it dawned on me. I'm like, this guy's a smart dude. I don't like him. He's shrewd, but he's smart because he was using this as a recruitment tool. He's calling this this American Nazi rally his recruitment rally to recruit people into the organization. And he's holding it in Washington, D.C. Why would anybody hold a Nazi rally to recruit in Washington, D.C.? D.C. is 2/3 black. There are no black people in Washington, D.C. who want to join the American Nazi Party. And certainly there are no Jews in D.C. or anywhere else who want to join the American Nazi Party. So why D.C.? Because, this is the smart part, he knew that would happen. He knew there'd be a riot and all kinds of crap going on, and he would have the official NBC, ABC, CBS footage. He would take that footage, go to the Pacific Northwest, and where it's predominantly white, and show that footage and say, listen, you see what's happening down in our nation's capital? The blacks and the Jews are taking over. You need to come join us so we can take our country back.
It's
and it works. It works.
I believe
now,
it.
The term "take our country back." You all most recently heard it because it was the Tea Party slogan, like Donald Trump's slogan is "Make America Great Again." The Tea Party slogan is "Take our country back."
Okay.
Now, that slogan actually started with the Klan in 1954, when Brown versus the Board of Education desegregated schools. You can go on YouTube, look up these rallies and stuff. When that thing was passed by the Supreme Court, there were all kinds of Klan rallies all around the country. So these burning crosses and some leader standing there behind the podium saying, "We're gonna take our country back. I'm not gonna let my little white boys and girls go to school with little N-words. Okay, we're gonna take our country back to segregation." So after Barack Obama got in office, we had this new political party called the Tea Party. And their slogan was "Take our country back." So it was a dog whistle, because I would ask Tea Party members, I would say, because I'm right here in DC, so I see every political group. I said, why are you all using a Klan slogan? Oh, no, we're not using Klan slogan. I said, well, yeah, you are. You're saying "take our country back." I said, you realize the Klan, oh yeah, but that was a long time ago. It doesn't mean that. I said, well, what does it mean? You're leaving it open-ended. You don't say "take our country back" from who? You don't say "take our country back" to what? You just say "take our country back." What does it mean? Well, what it means is we're going to take our country back from the Democrats. We're going to take our country back to Republican rule. Okay, that's fine. Why don't you say that? But when you leave it open-ended, you leave it open to anything. But now here's the point, though. Bill Clinton was a Democrat. Jimmy Carter was a Democrat. Where was the Tea Party? Where was the last time I heard of a Tea Party was the Boston Tea Party during the Revolutionary War, right? So there was no Tea Party during Clinton or Carter, who were both Democrats. Nobody's saying we're going to take our country back. But now all of a sudden, a black guy is in the White House and you're saying we're going to take our country back? What am I supposed to think, right? And when you get off of here, just go on YouTube and Google David Duke, Charlottesville. And I think the first clip that pops up is about 41 seconds long. Play that clip, and you'll see David Duke saying, "We're going to take our country back. Vote for Donald Trump." So there you have one of the biggest heads of the Klan, using that slogan again, long after 1954. Yeah. So it's something that resonates with people who know what that slogan means. It's just like, you never hear black people say, the good old days. The good old days is a white term. I wish I lived back in the good old days, when bread was 15 cents a loaf and you had a 1955 Chevy and, the good old days and great music and blah, blah, blah. We don't use that term because the good old days to you were the bad old days for us when we had to ride in the back of the bus or drink from a separate water fountain or be refused entrance into a restaurant or have to use a separate restroom. There was something good about those old days.
Sure.
Yeah, things were cheaper. Gas might cost for 25 cents a gallon. But in terms of being treated well, no, those were not good old days. So you never hear Black people say that phrase.
Yeah, I get it. So on both sides, whether it's white, Black, Hispanic, like how do we get to inform people, like you said, about racism and really get to the root of it? Because it's not just white people being racist.
It's on. You're right. Nobody has a monopoly on racism.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's in Blacks, it's in Hispanics, it's wherever. Okay,
Sure.
And it all has to be addressed. None of it is any more better than somebody else's racism.
It's all horrible, right?
It is all horrible, and none of it is acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why we need to address it by using education and exposure. Our country is becoming more and more diverse, and so we have to learn how to get along with each other. But in this country, we spend way too much time talking about the other person, or talking at the other person, or talking beyond or past the other person. Why don't we just spend half that time sitting down and talking with the other person? And it's very simple. Like you said earlier, we don't need legislation to cause us to do that. Legislation can only compel our behavior. It cannot compel our feelings. Mm-hmm. Just like the day that legislation said it's okay for people like me to ride in the front of the bus, didn't change the attitudes of the white bus riders.
Sure.
But it compelled their behavior to let me do it. Otherwise, they'd go to jail or get arrested. So we, getting to know one another comes from the grassroots, not from passing bills in Congress.
Yeah. No,
so we need to make that effort to do that, and it's as simple as what I call walking across the cafeteria. In any major city, you have companies, schools, whatever, where people of all different backgrounds are working together. They might even be on the same project. They might even be sharing the same cubicle. They work together. But then at 12 noon, everybody breaks for lunch and they go downstairs to the cafeteria, and Blacks sit with Blacks, Hispanics sit with Hispanics, that group sits with that group. They self-segregate. Now, does that mean that they're racist? No, not necessarily. People tend to feel more comfortable around people who share a similar culture or a similar language. They have something in common with, and that's fine. It's okay to want to be around people who share your ideas or your culture or whatever. Nothing wrong with that. But if it goes too far, like I'm better than you are, then that's a different story. It crosses the line. So what I say is, a couple times a week, when you're in the cafeteria, take a break from your usual homogenous lunch crew and walk across the cafeteria and just sit with somebody else that you never sat with before. Just have a conversation. Sure. Because you know what? You've got something to teach them, and they've got something to teach you, and we can learn from one another. I will tell you something that happens to me a lot. It happens, not during lockdown, of course, because I don't go out too far, but in general, I might give anywhere between 60 and 80 lectures a year, all around the country or abroad. But in this country, a lot of them are at college and universities, that hire me to come in and talk. So I'll give a lecture, and at the end of the lecture, I'll do a Q&A. And then when I finish the Q&A, there'll still be some students who want to come up to the podium and ask one last question or whatever. And I've also brought some Klan robes with me. And they want to touch one of the robes or to get a picture of it or whatever, which is fine. 2 to 3 out of every 10 lectures I give in that kind of environment, there'll be a student standing off in the distance somewhere. And I've come to realize what's going to happen, because that student isn't doing anything but standing over there by themselves. It's not like they're packing up their book bag or something. They're just, idling around. So I know what's going to happen, because it happens so often. They're waiting for this crowd to go away from me. And when I've answered all their last questions, or they've touched the robe or whatever, and they leave, and I'm standing there putting stuff away, he or she will then walk over. And I just played dumb. And they're like, hey, Mr. Davis, I enjoyed your lecture. Thank you. Shake their hand. And then they like look around. And then they say, my mother's in the Klan. They whisper, anybody out of earshot. My mother's in the Klan, or my father's a neo-Nazi. And I was raised that way. And now I'm here at University of fill in the blank. I'm dating this guy from Pakistan, or my girlfriend, my girlfriend's black, or my boyfriend is Jewish. I can't bring them home. My parents will kill me, or disown me, and I don't want to tell my friend because they'll drop me. So they got this secret that's burning on their chest, causing an ulcer, and they don't know what to do, but it has to come out. So I'm the perfect person for them to talk to, because, and I realize what has happened because, they're saying, they were raised that way. And now they're here at this university and because, in their neighborhood, they all are, I use the word again, homogenous. They all go to the same high school. They read the same books. They swim in the same community swimming pool, shop at the same grocery store, cheer the same sports team, probably vote for the same politician, etc. And now they come over here to this college, wherever it is, out of state or in state even. The neighborhood doesn't come with them. Mm-hmm. There are neighborhoods from all over the country now in this environment. People from all over the world here. And so now they're being exposed to stuff they didn't have in the neighborhood. They're realizing that Jewish people don't have horns and black people don't have tails, and Muslim people are okay, and now they're dating one of these people. And they realize their parents were wrong. Their friends at school were wrong about these people. How do I go back and tell my folks they were wrong? My folks wanted me to come get an education, but not that education.
Yeah.
And that, that's what happens. So education is the key.
Sure. Yeah. And I think it's on so many different levels because Daryl, I know you don't know this about me, but I've been in law enforcement for over 14 years mm-hmm. and, going through different aspects, working with so many different people and, just seeing the waves of how things go over the years. Cause things happen every 5 to 6 years, right? It's an odd wave that we ride, but just, being called a racist just because of the uniform I'm wearing, right. It's so ignorant, right? Is it? But where does that line go between ignorance and stupidity? On some of that, it's a weird thing to have to deal with so many people out there. But
it has to be something proactive, with law enforcement. It can't just be every time. Some black guy gets shot, then we have community meetings mm-hmm. and talk about it and talk about what police have to go through, what their training is, et cetera, et cetera. This needs to be done in advance because people are going to get shot.
Sure.
Either because they're criminals or because the officer feared for his life or whatever reason, mistakes are going to happen.
Yeah.
But you need to get in front of it before it happens. And there are a few things that I would say. And by the way, my father was one of the first black Secret Service agents in this country.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, he wanted to be an FBI agent, but J. Edgar Hoover was a racist, among other things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And so he wasn't hiring black people. He wasn't hiring females. And so my father went to the Secret Service, and Harry Anslinger, who was the head of the Secret Service at the time, hired 5 black people at one time, and 5 black men, and my dad was one of those. And but there was a ceiling, he could only go but so high, even at that time. And so he left the Secret Service and later and joined the Foreign Service, where you can go a little higher, but there was still a ceiling for black people. But anyway, a few things about police, like here where I live, they made I disagreed with the change. I meet, well, we have a new chief now. But I meet with the chief about every third Thursday of the month if I'm in town. They made a change. Before, they had the internal affairs people dressed in police uniform, and now they have them dressed in civilian clothes. And I disagreed with that change. I think it's detrimental, and I'll tell you why. And I questioned why was it done, and they said because here in the area is so diverse. We have a lot of people from South America, in other countries where police, are very brutal, and they fear the uniform. And so in order to if we want them to talk to us or whatever else, they're not as intimidated if we're in, civilian clothes, etc. And so I get that. And that might be a short-term fix to get some people from a foreign country who view the police as being somebody you don't want to associate with to come a little closer. But in the long run, I think that's detrimental, because what you're saying is we're police too, but the bad part of us are the ones in the uniform, but the ones in the suit and tie. We're the good guys. So what you want to do is you want people, regardless, to respect you in your uniform when they see you. And the only way you can do that is by being in the uniform and treating them with respect. Sure, there are going to be some bad cops out there who wear the uniform, and they're going to paint the department with a broad brush. But you get rid of those people, but let people know that, hey, those particular ones, not the whole department.
Yes. Because
I'm in a uniform and I'm going to treat you well. That's my feeling on it. And in terms of, I also think that there needs to be I understand that there's some legislation, federal legislation, but it hasn't moved off the table or anything like that. But I've been saying for a while, there needs to be a national registry for police officers who've been terminated for bad behavior or whatever. Because what happens is when they get fired from that department, they just go to another department, and the whole pattern starts all over again. But if there's a registry, then the next department can look it up and say, oh, no. Just like a child sex offender registry.
Hopefully they're doing a well enough background check. I know, I've been part of those before, but maybe they do slip through the cracks on some areas. So, it may not be a bad idea to have some type of, list. So it's nationwide. So you're not going to some small department and maybe, slipping through the cracks. But I think the citizen police academies, I think that's what I've seen has been like the most, beneficial for people in the community to be able to get in and ride with the police officer and see what they do and why they do it. So it's almost an idea of that education again, right? So I think that those.
Well, that's what I was saying. Get ahead of all these.
Yes, exactly.
Shootings are going to happen. Okay, so you get ahead of it. Teach the citizens. This is what we look for. This is what we expect. This is why we do this.
Yes.
And so they have, oh, okay, so that's what happened. Or, next time they hear about somebody getting shot, okay, well, then now we know what they have to go through to investigate this. Let's not react. Let's find out what the evidence shows, blah, blah, blah. And then if we see something that we didn't learn in the academy that's amiss, then we can complain about it and protest and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
Otherwise, don't jump the gun. Because people are going to make mistakes, and there are going to be bad cops out there as well. Sure.
Just like in every profession, right? There's somebody bad in every profession.
Right. But another thing though that you have with the police that you don't have in some of the other professions, like usually when some transgression has been committed by the police, first, it's defended. The guy followed proper police procedure. He feared for his life, so forth and so on. And then in the rare instance that this cop is charged and convicted, then the PIO comes out or the chief comes out on the media and says, well, in a department this large, we're bound to have a few bad apples. And to me, that's a misnomer. That is false. When you say that, to me, what you're telling me is there are more bad apples than there are good apples. And how I perceive that is this. When you tell me there are only a few bad apples and everybody else is good, well, all these good cops know who the bad apples are. But see, because people think of police in two categories, the good cops and the bad cops. But there's a third category that rarely gets mentioned. We all know what the bad cops do. The good cops won't do those things. But unfortunately, the good cops will turn a blind eye and not snitch on the bad cops because of that blue wall of silence. So in a sense, that makes them complicit to what the bad cop did, because we know if they do snitch, then they jeopardize their own safety from their fellow cops, who may be a little slow in coming to back them up when they need help or whatever else. So they're loath to report it. And who do they report it to? They report it to the brass. And what does the brass do? The brass leaks it down to the street level. Because back when they were on the street, they were probably doing the same thing. Not all of them, but some of them were doing the same thing. So how are they going to bust somebody for doing what they were doing? But so it's like the Frank Serpico, for example. That he was in that third category, which is the honest cop. The honest cop will tell. The honest cop, won't do those things, but the honest cop will report it because he doesn't want to be complicit. It's sort of like, you go into a neighborhood because, a crime has been committed, and somebody knows who did it, and you don't have the evidence, but somebody there knows.
Sure.
And your feeling is, well, if you know and you're not telling me, you're complicit.
Sure.
Well, it's the same. It's the same thing with the police.
Yeah.
But the police need some kind of mechanism because, yes, their life is on the line, not just from the criminals, but from their fellow officers who they count on to back them up if they need help.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have gone against one of your fellow officers, don't expect them to back you up. So there needs to be some kind of mechanism where they can report something anonymously, sort of like citizens can call in a tip anonymously and provide information. There also needs to be some kind of protection for police who are witnessing some of their colleagues doing something and they want to report it and not get retaliation from their own.
Sure. And I think that there is legislation in the works to make it, mandatory to have to, come forward with that, with any type of information. And maybe that was something that happened a lot in the past. In my experience, if police see, anyone I've worked with over the years has seen somebody do something bad, it's like, look, you make it hard for us.
Right.
You're the bad apple and you're making our job that much harder. So I think over the last 10 years, it's been a lot more prevalent to be like, hey, this isn't cool, man. Get the heck out. You don't deserve to wear this uniform. You don't deserve to wear this badge. So
because if there are just a few bad apples in a department this large, then why let a few bad apples tarnish the whole department?
Exactly. Get them out.
Get them out. Exactly.
No, I completely agree with you, Daryl. So it's education on all levels, in all directions. So
right.
Daryl, man, so glad you came on the Actions and Limits podcast and shared your story with us. I know Paul and I have been watching a lot of your content. What main projects do you have going on now, or what's the best way for people to get a hold of you, Daryl?
Yeah. My website is Daryl, Daryl, only one R, DarylDavis.com. And my email is Daryl@DarylDavis.com. And I just finished writing my second book, and it's a continuation of the first book, Clan-Destine Relationships. So right now it's going through the editing process. So it'll be out in 2021. Okay. And hopefully you guys will have me back sometime.
Yeah, we'll definitely have you back, Daryl, anytime, man. And looking forward to that book coming out, and we'll make sure to put all your contact information down there in the show notes so everybody can reach out, check out your content, check out your other interviews. I know that the Joe Rogan one I watched, it was like 2.5 hours or something. It took a while to go through, but a lot of good stuff. A lot of good stuff you talked about, Daryl, and I'm glad you came on the show and joined us.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for your service, man. I really appreciate that, and hopefully, we can do some more. And I really appreciate, your willingness to come forward and talk about these topics. Sure. They're hard topics, but you know what? This country is changing, and whenever you have change, there's some degree of upheaval, and people are humans. Are creatures of habit. They don't like change. They talk about it, but they don't like it.
Yeah.
Until it happens.
They hate how it is and don't like change.
Listen, when I was right after I got out of high school, in between about a month and a half before I went to college, a buddy of mine worked for a moving company, and so he talked me into getting the gig there with him. So I went to work for this moving company. And, we move people locally here in Maryland, or from Maryland down to Florida or whatever. And we'd go to somebody's house, 3 weeks in advance of the move or whatever, and give them an estimate of what's going to cost to move this many boxes or carry their piano down 2 flights of steps or whatever. And they're all excited about moving to Florida or wherever because the weather's so great and, you know, summer all year round and have a pool in the backyard, on and on and on. They're all excited about it. So we show up 3 weeks later and, you know, they've been to that house for 30 years and all of a sudden, you know, you're moving their bedroom, you're moving their couch, and they're like freaking out, you know. You know, even though 3 weeks ago they're ready to get the hell out of there, now they're freaking out because they got to move. Change is happening.
Sure.
Change is real.
Yeah, no, I get it, Daryl. So again, yeah, I wish you the best. You know, good luck with the new book coming out.
Thank you.
Man, really glad to have you on the show, man.
My pleasure, both of you. So y'all have a great week, and we'll see you soon.
All right, Daryl. Thank you.
Paul, how great was that to have Daryl Davis on the show, have him share his story, man? I think we could have kept talking to him for like another hour, man.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of information that he gave. You know, I love the fact that he talks about, he didn't say it out loud, but he talked about that empathy piece. That, I mean, there's a lot of people that can't do what he does. I mean, seriously, if somebody's, you know, insulting you to your face, and just sit there and take it and then be very calm and tell them exactly why they're wrong, you know, in a calm manner after they're done with their dissertation on how stupid you are. I mean, that is a skill in itself. And, you know, I don't know how we get to that point, but that's the point. If we could get to that point, we're in really good shape.
Yeah, it's an interesting point to get to, especially when your job requires you to do it. But yeah, I think Daryl, with his expansive, you know, traveling and dealing with different cultures, you know, I think it definitely benefited him, and obviously his parents were a big influence as well. So really glad that Daryl could come on the show and share his story with us. So amazing interview, Paul. So another great week here on the Actions Limits podcast, man.
Probably one of the more important interviews we've done here on the Actions Limits podcast.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, man. So we can, I say we just wrap up the show there.
Sounds good. For Justin Atherton, this is Paul Fortune. We'll see you next week.
All right. See you next Monday. Thank you for listening to the show. Don't miss an episode. Click and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on your favorite podcast platform and find us on Instagram and Facebook under Actions and Limits to stay updated on all our upcoming content. Continue to email the show at actionsandlimits@gmail.com for our segment Ask Paul Anything. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.